So this is a piece of nonfiction called Stash. Every artist requires supplies. Each aesthetic demands fuel for its creative manifestations. Yarn, in its many forms, is the fundamental ingredient for anything knitted or crocheted, and though I do the former more than the latter, I enjoy both. As a painter might look at a sea of color and gravitate toward the perfect shade of peach or a transcendent teal, so can I, while browsing in a yarn store, spot hand-spun, kettle-dyed wool in vivid rainforest hues from a South American artist cooperative. I can't leave my favorite New York fiber haunt pearl with at least two skeins of Monostil Uruguay, one of my favorite artisanal yarns. My partner Richard patiently waits outside, captivated by his smartphone, until he spies in my hand a shopping bag of brown craft paper, a burst of woolen color peeking from the top. "What are you going to make with that?" he asks. "I'm not sure. I just saw it and had to have it." It is a standard reply that typically fends off further inquiries. "Where are you going to store it?" The interrogation continues. "In one of my bins, I'll find space, don't you worry." I clutch the bag in both arms, fending off any insinuation of a potential product return. It happens most often when we travel. I'll visit a yarn store and, when possible, buy something of local origin. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, for example, I bought alpaca yarn made from the fiber of animals raised on the nearby coast. These yarns are not just material for craft, but lasting reminders of a journey, markers of time and place. Sometimes when the Black Sheep, a yarn store where I teach knitting classes, gets new yarns on their shelves, some conjure that I just have to have it in my collection feeling. I'll know I'll get the standard line of questioning when I get home, but there's beauty in my obsession, tangible output from my artistic pursuits. Sometimes, if timing is right, I'm able to get my purchases home and properly stored unnoticed. Amidst a full-time job, graduate school, and other things life brings my way, I don't want to go shopping for yarn at a moment when I get the itch to make something. When I get the knack for knitting or the craving for crochet, all I have to do is look at the 4 bins under the bed or the 2 in the back room, don't judge, and invariably I will find something interesting and unique to inspire my next project. I rest comfortably knowing that whenever I'm inspired to create something beautiful, I know I'll have yarn to satisfy the requirements of my personal aesthetics. It may be wool or a wool and silk blend, could be cotton. Occasionally I'm amazed by the softness of alpaca. They're all in my collection, so regardless of my mood or the climate, this artist has a full palette to choose from. My penchant for yarn and for making things started early. Whenever I stayed with my grandparents as a child, I always slept on a twin bed in Grandma's sewing room. There was an old singer that was built into a desk, and the room had a slight patina of machine oil and chantilly powder. Next to the desk was a dresser, each drawer filled with countless pieces of fabric, some in long lengths with enough to make a dress, some only scraps from previous projects, but ones Grandma would, no doubt, use in a future quilt. Opening the closet doors would reveal large bags and storage tubs filled with rough, prickly acrylic yarn for her knitting or crochet projects. Everything was organized, but in quantities suitable for a storehouse rather than a suburban home. Her house was a reflection of her skills. Intricate lace doilies covered the surface of any end table or vanity. Each sofa or chair was draped with a crocheted afghan in vivid hues and varied textures. Every bed in the house was nestled under a hand-sewn quilt that transformed patchwork pieces of leftover fabric from previous projects into something that gave warmth and carried memories across generations. I always looked forward to craft store jaunts with Grandma, and I could spend hours looking at the myriad fabrics, yarns, and tools required to make something out of something else. She shopped more often for notions than yarn or fabric because she had gathered a notable collection of materials at home. I didn't know it then, but the ability to stash appears to be hereditary. Growing up in the Great Depression in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri, with 3 daughters and one on the way in 1946, Mildred had mastered many crafts, not for art's sake, but out of necessity. I know Richard doesn't mind my evolving collection of fine fibers, which now includes possum from New Zealand, because he too receives hand-knitted gifts to sport on our annual winter jaunts to New York City. He's a patient man who has come to understand what even 30 minutes of knitting time can do for my disposition. He's also developed a keen eye to spot the word yarn on his storefront at long range. He also has become notoriously diligent in pulverizing any moth that may creep silently from porch to living room through an open door. The moth is an assassin of stash. To clear a gathering of knitters from any room, simply release a moth into the atmosphere. Because yarn stash is the main ingredient of a fiber artist's work, we take great caution to protect our yarns from damage or destruction. Richard has come to understand this and will honorably risk life and limb to destroy any moth that dare enter our humble bungalow. Despite his patience and understanding, I'm almost certain he thinks I'm moderately crazy. But because he knows my art means a lot to me, he does what he can to support me in my obsession. He also knows it could be much worse. I could ask for my own sheep.